this case. So I decided to skip some other ones that I had requested in my list and skip ahead to this one, but I will get back to those other requests soon. If you're new around here, please consider subscribing to the channel. I will have a couple of links in the pinned comment. One to my Patreon page for 4 extra videos a month for $5 a month, and also to my members only page where you can watch all my videos ad free. Of course, since I started this, which has been 3 months, almost 4 months. So, let's talk about Nicole. She had kind of a harder life from the beginning, but by the age of 17, she was described as a beauty. But she found herself pregnant and single when she had her son, or after she had her son. She danced in a few strip clubs around the Dallas area to make ends meet. By the time that she was in her 30s, things were looking up. Her son at that point was already in high school and was working as an assistant for a stockbroker, enrolled in nursing school, and she was in a good relationship with a wonderful man. His name was Mike Adams. Mike was older, I think he was about 16 years older than Nicole, and he was a repo man. So when people didn't make their payments, he would go and get the stuff they didn't pay for. He did very well. He owned a nice house in the affluent Dallas suburb of Frisco, Texas. When Mike and Nicole started dating, he was like that perfect Prince Charming, you know. He was a gentleman. He would bring flowers and write love notes to her, but it wasn't long before Mike asked Nicole and her son Trey to move in with him. And the wonderful gentleman that he was didn't last long enough. Mike became obsessive with his personal belongings and his home. He would maintain everything in his so loved house. The stuff in the closets, cupboards, and even the fridge were all perfectly organized, to the point that labels on cans had to be facing the same direction as if they were on a supermarket displays. Did I say displays? a showpiece. He also had this circular white couch that he wouldn't let anybody sit on it. He was afraid that it was going to get dirty. Well, I know somebody like that with a particular white couch. But just so if you haven't got it yet, he was kind of obsessed with order. He even had an extensive handgun collection that was sorted by caliber size. I mean, I would say you have too much time in your hands, but whatever makes you happy. One evening, Mike made spaghetti for Nicole, knowing it was her favorite dish, but Trey spilled a little bit of sauce on the tile floor, and he, went crazy. Mike went crazy. He started yelling, and it wasn't for, the time being, but he was upset about that for about a week. Less than 2 months after Nicole and her son moved in, they moved out. The yelling was unbearable, and neither of them were going to put up with it. Mike was not the kind of guy that liked to be left, So he kind of turned the charm back on and asked Nicole if he could treat her to dinner to our nice restaurant to apologize. He, during dinner, swore he wouldn't yell at them ever again. He was that perfect gentleman again. After dinner and a perfect evening, he took Nicole back to his house and then proposed to her. He had a big diamond ring, and she just couldn't see through his fake charm. So she accepted his proposal and then decided that she would move back in. And she did. But soon after, the argument started again. And the yelling got so heated that during an argument, Mike ripped the ring from her finger and fractured her finger. Nicole at this point got a new apartment across town with her son and tried to put this in the past. She came home from work one evening and the front door was wide open, which is very scary, but to make things worse, her dog was missing. A few days later, after a big search for their pet, they learned that a car hit the dog and that he had died, and weird stuff continued to happen. Another time, she came home to find that someone had broken into their home and poured bleach once that one was, on fire. So Mike used this opportunity to rescue her and offered to co-sign on a loan for a new car. She thought she didn't have any other options, so she accepted his offer. So in March 2013, Nicole took the car title to Mike's house. She wanted him to sign off on the title so the car would be all hers and she would be done basically with him. She was done with Mike and she wanted him out of her life. She also wanted to pick up the last of her belongings. But Mike, it was like a machine. He turned on the charm again and offered her some spaghetti. I mean, for the love of Pete, don't tell me that spaghetti is the one thing, because he knew. I mean, I'm telling you the story, okay? He knew that she couldn't resist a nice plate of pasta. What the heck? I mean, some of these cases really make me, well, you'll see what happened. He was saying that he was trying to make peace with her, but it didn't take long for the knockout drug to take effect. Yes, as you're probably imagining it, he spiked the spaghetti sauce, which it was kind of, it drugged her for a few hours. It did take some time for the full effect, so Nicole remembered being walked into the bedroom and Mike taking her clothes off. She remembers saying no, but she couldn't move her body, her arms or legs, she told the police later on. Apparently he used a toy. They had never used these toys before. Then he started taking pictures of her, and that is the last thing she remembers. When Nicole woke up, she was in the bedroom, and she was tied with rope. She was still naked. Her hands were tied behind her back and her ankles were tied together. She was gagged too. She struggled but managed to get herself untied and run naked from the house to the nearest neighbor's house, screaming and banging on the door. But Mike heard her screams before the neighbors did, grabbed her and dragged her back into the garage. In the garage, Mike put down a large plastic tarp on the floor, handcuffed her, and bound her ankles with zip ties. His anger consumed him, and he tried ripping her hair out but couldn't get it to come out, so he cut her hair using a knife. She was captive for 24 hours. And Nicole, at this point, or in the end, realized that the only way to survive this was to reason with him. She said that she wouldn't press charges and that she would stay with him, that they would go to couples counseling. And in the end, Mike agreed. Nicole said, "If you don't arrest him, he's going to end up killing me." Police searched Mike's house and car. He had planned on getting rid of the evidence, and in the trunk of the car, they found the sex toy, the zip ties, the duct tape, and her hair still attached. They even found the near empty jar of spiked spaghetti sauce. Police arrested Mike on charges of aggravated sexual assault and unlawful restraint, but he easily made bail, and he was waiting his trial. Because of his release, Nicole was granted an emergency protective order against him, and Mike was to have no contact with her at all. Nicole and her son, moved 20 miles away to Melissa, Texas, which is in another county. She used a friend's name to rent a home and set up her utilities in hopes it would keep Mike from finding her. But then Mike sent flowers to her home. He found her. Nicole filed another police complaint, and this clearly violated the order. She was afraid that he was going to show up at her door. Her complaint to the police made Mike a little bit more angry, if that's even possible. And she came home from work one day to find a plastic tarp and handcuffs on her front porch. Obviously, he was threatening her, and he didn't want her to testify against him. Nicole and her son were terrified. In August of 2013, they visited her father in Florida to get away for a while. Her dad begged them to stay with him, but Nicole didn't listen. On September 9th, 2013, Nicole's 17-year-old son returned home from school to find his mother dead. Her body was laying face down, and she was naked on her bed with 2 gunshot wounds to her face. Mike had used a GPS tracking device that he attached to her car to track her every move. Police arrested Mike Adams and charged him with capital murder, a term used only in 7 states. That meant the crime is eligible for a penalty of execution. Crime scene investigators recovered 2 used condoms at the scene, but the DNA didn't match Mike or anyone in the police database. But the outside of the condom matched Mike's DNA. So they concluded that Mike was trying to plant evidence. Police also found on his computer that he had been tracking her using the GPS system, and had searched for routes to her home in Melissa, Texas. The arsenal of guns, one of which it was proven to be the one used to kill her. During the trial, it was revealed, however, that Nicole and Detective Greer, who was the one in charge of the investigation, apparently they had exchanged sexual texts. And it was proven that Nicole was sending nude pics of herself to this detective. The detective testified that their involvement was limited to pictures, that they never had a physical relationship, but this really helped Mike's defense. His attorneys claimed that the case against Mike was compromised by her involvement with the detective. However, this didn't affect the outcome of the trial because the jury came back with a guilty verdict. Mike Adams was convicted of capital murder in the state of Texas, where they don't mess around. Capital murder carries an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which makes the rest of the states that don't use this term sound like sissies, really. This was one of those cases that it really angered me when I was reading about it, and I tried not to cover those cases that put me in an emotional state, but it's coming from all different places. One of them is the very clear domestic violence in this case, and abuse, psychological, physical, sexual. I mean, this is one of the most horrible combination of abuse I've learned in a while. I mean, that there are several domestic violence cases I've covered, but this one was a little bit different because Nicole was a very pretty girl, lady, woman. I think the amount of people blaming her for or calling her names because of her involvement with the detective, because she was, pretty and could get basically any guy that she wanted, because Nicole accepted Mike to co-sign this car, because of Nicole giving second chances to this guy who would turn on the charm and convince her again. But in the end, there's a lot of blaming on the victim, and there's little blaming on the actual criminal, in this case, the charming Mike. I find funny when people that have no experience with domestic violence, never experience it, or know anybody who experienced it, or when they trying to explain why the behavior of the abusive person in the relationship. There shouldn't be a why, If you're dating somebody and they're messy and you hate messes, well, maybe it's time to move on, You either compromise because you love that person and accept that they're messy and work things, like make some kind of commitment of messy, but you just make sure you clean up after yourself. Or, you have money, hire help, or you know what I mean. Or you say, well, I cannot take messy people. I cannot take people making mistakes or spilling sauce by accident. So I think I better find somebody that's perfect or die alone. If your husband or wife is a cheater and you hate cheaters, are you gonna get rid of your husband? Most people would say no. And that way, it's like, I guess, to some people comes as common sense. Okay, I cannot take this cheater, so we're gonna get a divorce. Well, he's a little bit too pushy. I'm gonna move away. Or she's too pretty and she's flirting, so I'm gonna end things now before I get angry for her being the way that she is, which she's entitled to be flirty and she's entitled to be her own person. It's up to you if you decide to stay with somebody with those things that bother you, or you don't. So excusing the abuser here will never end well, in my opinion, because if you really think about it, there's no excuse for abuse. It will never be, and no matter how you were raised, no matter, I mean, yes, some cultural differences, some things how they work in different countries, but this was happening here in America, and I think we can all agree that there is no excuse for abuse. And we come back to, maybe some other cases that didn't have the signs, like the Chris Watt case or Scott Peterson, when they were ready to get a divorce or when they were ready to not be with their wives anymore. They didn't actually became abusive. They decided to get rid of their wives. So abuse not always means that it's going to end how it ended for Nicole. But it's a big step towards that. And I think that's why there's a lot of people that would take the abuse, because they think that the abusive is going, or the abuser, it's going to change. I understand that's why she was giving him other, opportunity, another opportunity, another opportunity. If you or somebody you know have been going through something remotely similar to this, I'm gonna have a number. I think there's also a number that you can text 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, where you can get help to get out of that. I hope none of you are going through this, but chances are that if you're not going through it, you may know somebody who is, and it's a tough position to be in. Thank you so